Ethan pulled into the parking garage in a car he couldn't actually afford. Leased. 18 months. Payments that ate almost a third of his salary. He backed carefully into a spot near the elevator, checked his reflection in the side mirror, straightened his jacket, then walked into the office like a man who had it all figured out. Nice ride, someone said near the coffee station. Ethan smiled. Just something I picked up. He didn't mention the payments. He never did. Ethan was 32, worked in business development at a mid-sized marketing firm, and had built an entire identity out of looking like someone who was winning. The car, the watch, financed over 24 months. The apartment downtown that cost more than he could comfortably admit. The vacation photos, posted 2 weeks after the trip because he was still paying it off. None of it was fake, exactly. He really did have the car. He really did go to Cancun. It just wasn't the whole picture. And Ethan had gotten very good at only ever showing the parts that looked like a rival. His co-worker Marcus, younger, louder, newer to the team, treated him like a blueprint. Bro, how'd you afford that watch on our salary? You figured out, Ethan said, tapping the side of his nose. Priorities. Marcus nodded like he'd just received wisdom. Ethan didn't correct him. The building had a maintenance man named Walter. Late 60s. Quiet. Gray coveralls. Name patch stitched crooked on one side like it had been sewn by hand a long time ago. He fixed the elevator when it stuck. Changed the light bulbs in the parking garage. Nobody really looked at him twice. Ethan certainly hadn't, not in 3 years of working there, beyond the occasional nod in passing. That changed on a Tuesday when Ethan's leased car wouldn't start. He was standing in the garage at 6:40 p.m., key in the ignition, engine clicking uselessly, when Walter walked over with a small toolbox already in hand, like he'd seen this exact scene play out 100 times before. Pop the hood, Walter said. Ethan blinked. You don't have to. I'm already here. Walter looked at the battery terminals for about 10 seconds, cleaned off a bit of corrosion with a cloth from his pocket, and reattached a cable that had worked itself loose. Try it now. The engine turned over. Ethan stared at the dashboard, mildly stunned. How'd you know to do that? Cars aren't complicated, Walter said, closing the hood. People just don't look closely enough at the small things until something stops working. He picked up his toolbox and started walking away. Wait, Ethan called. Let me buy you a coffee or something. For the help. Walter paused, considered it, then shrugged. Sure. They sat at a small cafe near the building. Walter still in his gray coveralls, Ethan in his jacket, an expensive watch that suddenly felt slightly out of place across the table from a man who fixed elevators for a living. You've worked here long? Ethan asked. 11 years. Here. 20-something before that at other places. You like it? Walter shrugged again. It's honest work. Keeps my hands busy. Ethan took a sip of his coffee. The kind of small talk pause that usually meant the conversation was ending. Instead, something made him keep going. Can I ask you something kind of random? Sure. Do you ever feel like, Ethan searched for the words, like you're behind? Like everyone around you is doing better, and you're just where you are? Walter studied him for a moment, like he was deciding how honestly to answer. I retired once, he said. 8 years ago. Ethan frowned. Wait, you're retired? Was. For about a year and a half. Then why are you back working maintenance? Walter smiled, the first real smile Ethan had seen from him. Because I wanted to. Not because I needed to. Ethan set his cup down slowly. I don't understand. I ran a small manufacturing supply business for almost 30 years. Sold it in my late 50s for enough that neither my wife nor I have to worry about money for the rest of our lives, even accounting for our grandkids' college, God willing. Lived modestly the whole way through. Never drove anything newer than 5 years old. Never once financed a single thing I couldn't pay off within a month if I had to. Ethan stared at him. You're telling me you're rich? And you fix elevators? I'm telling you I'm comfortable, Walter said. And I fix elevators because sitting at home doing nothing made me miserable. And I like knowing exactly what I'm worth to the people around me without a paycheck attached to it. Nobody here treats me differently because of a number in a bank account they can't see anyway. I like that. Kept me honest. Ethan didn't say much for a moment. Something about the conversation had quietly rearranged a few things in his head, though he couldn't yet name exactly what. I have a leased car, he heard himself say. Payments I'm barely covering most months. A watch I financed. An apartment that's honestly more than I should be spending. He hadn't planned on saying any of that out loud. It just came out oddly easy, across a small table from a man in gray coveralls, who clearly had no reason to judge him, and more importantly, no reason to be impressed by him either. Walter listened without reacting much. Why? I don't know. Everyone at work, everyone I know, honestly, measures each other by what we can see. The car, the watch, the trips. If I show up looking like I'm behind, people treat me like I'm behind. Do you actually believe that? Or is that just what you've been told long enough that it feels true? Ethan didn't have a quick answer for that. Walter continued, unhurried. Here's the part nobody advertises, because it doesn't look impressive on a screen. Real success is mostly quiet. It's boring most days. It's paying something off instead of showing it off. It's showing up consistently at a job nobody applauds you for. It's having enough saved that a bad month doesn't wreck you, even if nobody around you ever finds out that number exists. The loud version, the one you're building, that's not success. That's a performance of success, and performances are expensive to keep running. You're not actually further ahead than the version of yourself who drove a cheaper car and kept the difference. You just look like you are to people who are mostly performing the same thing back at you. Ethan sat with that for a long moment, the coffee going lukewarm in front of him. So what, I should just lie boring? Walter laughed, not unkindly. I'm not saying boring. I'm saying quiet. There's a difference. Quiet doesn't mean small. It means the proof lives somewhere nobody has to see it for it to be real. My bank account doesn't need an audience to be true. Neither does the fact that I could retire again tomorrow if I felt like it. The people spending the most effort convincing others they've made it are usually the ones working the hardest to convince themselves. Ethan didn't fix his entire financial life in one conversation. That's not how it works, and Walter never pretended otherwise. But 3 weeks later, he called the leasing company and asked what it would take to get out of the car early. It cost him a penalty, and it stung, and Marcus asked why he'd downgraded to something so much more ordinary. Priorities, Ethan said. And this time he actually meant it a different way than he had the first time he'd used that word. He sold the watch 2 months after that. Put the money toward the balance, still sitting on it, quietly, without mentioning it in any conversation, without needing anyone to notice the absence on his wrist. Nobody at the office really registered the change. That was sort of the point. The version of Ethan that used to need people to register things was slowly being replaced by a version that didn't need an audience to know what was actually true about his life. 6 months after the parking garage, Ethan sat with Walter again at the same small cafe. This time because he'd asked, not because a dead battery had forced it. How's the quiet art coming along? Walter asked, half joking. Slow, Ethan admitted. Not as fun as the loud version most days. It's not supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be true. Ethan smiled slightly. I paid off the watch balance last week. Nobody knows. Didn't post anything about it. Walter nodded. Like that detail mattered more than anything else Ethan could have said. That's the whole thing right there. The proof used to need witnesses. Now it doesn't. That's when you know it's actually starting to work. They sat in comfortable silence for a while after that. 2 men on opposite ends of a life, drinking coffee that had gone lukewarm again, neither of them in any particular hurry to prove anything to the other. If you've ever built a version of yourself that looked more successful than it felt, this might be your parking garage moment. You don't need an audience for the proof to be real, and you don't need anyone else to notice the quiet work you're doing to know it's working. If this story hits something in you, let me know in the comments what your loud version has been costing you and hit subscribe, because next week's story might be the push you actually needed.